All right, well, there's three of us, so, and it's time. Let's go ahead and get started. There's Martha. So Gary, what's up?
Yes, thank you, commissioners. We're starting today with Community Prosperity Initiative update. We have staff from County Administration and Clackamas Workforce Partnership and the Athena Group, our contractor. They're all loading into the room here. So we'll wait just a brief moment to do that. And I'll ask Megan and Bridget, please unmute yourselves when you're ready and turn on your cameras. There's Megan, thank you. All right, great. And looks like Cindy Becker was going to present. I don't see her online. So Megan, can I ask you to kick it off, please, with a quick update on where we've been and where we're going. So again, commissioners, this is one of your priorities in your strategic plan, the Community Prosperity Initiative. So this is an update, an informational update only. Megan Picard is with the Athena Group, our contractor that is helping us coordinate this project. And Bridget Daisy is the Executive Director of the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, which has a role in helping advance this moving forward. So Megan, if I may turn it over to you, please, to begin the briefing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, commissioners, for having us. Again, my name is Megan Picard, and I am a principal consultant with the Athena Group and have been serving as the project manager for the Clackamas Community Prosperity Collaboratives. As Gary noted, Bridget Daisy is also with us, and she's going to pick up on this presentation where I leave off. Also joining us today in audience are the lab leaders from each of the participating communities, as well as our communications lead. And we'll introduce each of them in a little bit in case you want to come to questions and direct any questions toward them. We can pull them out of the audience, as I understand anyway. So first, we had a presentation to share with you. I'm not seeing it on here. Did you want me to share my screen on that? Hey, Gary,
Yeah.
you're up.
Yeah, oh, I can't, that's so easy to do, commissioners. I know what it's like when we mute ourselves. Christina, do you have that PowerPoint by chance? If not, can we give Megan a share screen opportunity, please?
I just made Megan a co-host, so she should be able to share her screen now.
Okay, great.
Oh, Cindy Becker's on off. Can you bring Cindy Becker in too, Christina? Thank you.
Great, great, great.
Go ahead, Megan.
So pardon me while I get that set up, and we'll get that started for you. It's always a trick, right, to get these so so that we can share from, not notes, but from our slideshow. So great. I'm gonna go ahead and move here right into just kind of a refresher about what this project is all about, since y'all have plenty of things on your minds. So the Prosperity Collaboratives, in short, are small groups of community residents, service providers, and others engaged in community design labs in an equity-oriented and human-centered design process, basically put together to identify and try strategies to address poverty. The basic process is pictured to the right on the slide here, starting with the connect phase and ending with plans to scale up after successfully evaluating them at the end of the try phase. That's the experimental phase. Athena proposed this project initially because we believe our best hope for finding truly workable, equitable solutions to some of our most persistent community challenges like poverty are with the people in our local communities, especially those individuals and families with direct experience. So the labs are currently in the design phase of their work down here at the bottom, which I'll tell you more about in a moment. So there's also a system leadership aspect to this work. And the county resource team has been organized to support the work of the labs and to coordinate system responses as needed. That group is made up of county staff and leadership, as well as Clackamas Workforce Partnership and city and community college leadership. Finally, we have incorporated equity training to support inclusiveness and effectiveness in this work. So now, moving into the design labs, we'll give you some more details about what's happening in each one of them, starting with Canby. The Colby Lab is one of the most diverse labs. More than half of its members are Latinx and communicate primarily in Spanish. So it's a fully bilingual lab using language justice practices. Local nonprofits like Bridging Cultures, the High School Career Center, City Economic Development staff, and other civic participants like MACG and Kiwanis members are also involved. They have focused their efforts on resource navigation, as you can see in the problem and solution statements that are on the screen here. And they're currently looking at designing video tutorials or a resource navigation app, potentially with local ambassadors to provide direct assistance as needed. Milwaukee includes an array of service providers like those at the Wichita Center, plus city leadership, school district staff, a Rotarian, and several unaffiliated community members, including a local business owner and a student. They have selected childcare as their focus. Given the significant childcare desert in many areas around the county and state, we anticipate that this one will garner some wider interest, potentially anyway. We know it is also something that others, including CWP, the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, have been working on. And they're linking their efforts up as much as possible while taking advantage of the lab model in order to experiment and innovate. So the project they're designing now is specifically seeking to remove financial barriers to both providing childcare and accessing it. So from both the provider side as well as the family side. And last but not least, the Estacada Lab is another bilingual lab and includes community service providers like the food bank, city representatives, the school district, the community college, and several unaffiliated residents, including a volunteer at the Yellow House, which provides a resources for lower income individuals and families. This one's a little bit more complex. Their top identified problem from the very beginning of this work has been housing. But it was determined that housing was too big and complex of an issue to begin with in this first lab effort. However, I wanted to make sure to note it here because more affordable housing is a critical need for Estacada. And we hope it will stay on everyone's radar. And by the way, we haven't just said, oh, we can't do that. We did make sure that there were connections with folks in Estacada and members of the county resource team so that there's some ongoing discussion around housing and what solutions may be in addition to the work that's already happening in the community. So that said, they also found access to intergenerational enrichment and advancement opportunities to be really pretty limited there, and especially since they're so removed from other areas in the county. So they are developing a project to help realize their vision, as you see here in their solution statement, of creating an inclusive multilingual community school. Their specific project that they're working on aims to identify and close internet service gaps and provide access and training on how and why to use this technology. That why piece was a particular need that they identified in their outreach and conversations in the community. So this includes this exploring potential to get some kind of computers into households to enable equitable access to this resource. So I think before we move on from the labs, I did want to make a final note on them so that you know that each of these labs, all three, are working to put together applications for the county's small grants. They are seeking funding to support kind of enhanced testing and or scale up following their test results. So they and we are really grateful that this opportunity exists and see the grants as a significant opportunity to leverage relationships and connections into some really tangible and useful, important results in these communities. Now, I also wanted to briefly touch on some project challenges. First, we understand that the longer timelines that come with process-oriented work like this can be frustrating for some, especially for folks who are really action-oriented. And of course, those timelines get even longer when we're working with multiple systems and trying to lead in a holistic way. And we also know that it's really important. And so we've really focused on trust and relationship building while also learning about the needs and possibilities in each community. And we are really excited as we're now getting to the concrete projects that we know everybody's been waiting for. And as I mentioned, are slated for testing this fall. Of course, I also wanted to note that we have experienced extra delays due to COVID-19. If not for COVID-19, we would actually likely be in testing right now. Instead, we had a couple of pauses. First, we needed to pause as everyone first got oriented to this new reality, if this thing was going to be lasting for a while. And then, of course, then how we would engage with each other in ways that would continue to harness those relationships that were already built and continue to build and nurture them. And then, as we felt pretty confident in that, we faced additional delays as Athena Lab leaders got personally impacted and both experienced direct challenges that they were experiencing caused them to have to step out of their leadership roles. And so then, yeah, we were faced with, okay, well, now how do we keep this momentum going and be as effective, if not more? So the great thing about that is that those challenges turned into opportunities. And I really personally see even stronger potential benefits coming out of this process because of this shift. So I'm really pleased to announce that Ant Farm Youth Services and Todos Juntos have joined forces to lead the Estacada Lab. Two Foxes Singing, or Nunpa, from Ant Farm, and Ashley Carroll, as well as Kayla Cowich, are all with us in the audience today. I'm also happy to announce that the Clackamas Workforce Partnership has taken on leadership of the other two labs. Brent Baylog is working with Milwaukee, and Brian Fuentes is working with Canby, and they are also with us in the audience today. So given that all of that leadership was shifting from, oh, I see a hand raised. Would you like me to pause here for a question? Or we can wait and grab them all?
Oh, wait,
Martha,
wait.
go ahead.
No, I'm going to wait until the end. I just wanted to
Okay.
make first in the queue. No.
Perfect. Thank you. So because we were shifting from Athena leadership to local leadership of the labs, that really prompted us to say, hey, this might be a great opportunity to shift overall project leadership as well. That was already planned to happen toward the end of the project, and we just felt like it would be more robust, stronger, and really work toward developing a sustainable system after Athena is gone. So we invited the Clackamas Workforce Partnership and Bridget Daisy, namely, to step into this role, in part because we see their focus and approach to their work as the kind of system leadership that is really needed for long-term success. Plus, they have been deeply involved in the project from the very beginning, with staff involved in all 3 labs as members prior to stepping into leadership roles. And then Bridget actively involved in the county resource team from the beginning as well. So at this point, I would love to stop talking and turn it over to Bridget to share a bit of her vision for the future of this work. And then Bridget, after you do that, if you can open to questions, and then when we're all done with questions, I'd just like a few minutes at the end to go over a few next steps, just to wrap things up.
Okay, Bridget.
Thank you so much, Megan, and thank you, Board of County Commissioners and Chair Bernard for allowing me to just share a little bit about our work and around this effort. So as Megan indicated, Clackamas Workforce Partnership has been engaged in this in the Prosperity Collaborative since even before it began. I remember having conversations in your offices about how to work on prosperity and wealth building in the county, and we really see the workforce system as an aligned partner in those efforts. Skill building, talent acquisition, building career pathways is definitely is in our wheelhouse, and all of the energy that the labs have created in their own communities just walks in lockstep with our work. So as far as the design or the system evolution and how we move forward, our vision is really to, in our own system and with our public partners, is to restructure and reimagine systems to be more accessible and human-centered, and to be responsive to cultural and community needs and of our individuals and families, not just for the short term, but for the long term. As we move forward within our own system rebuilding and reimagining what workforce could look like, or public workforce development could look like in Clackamas County and the broader region, we know that the shared vision of training and tools made available to people is going to be now more as important as ever as we think about recovery from this pandemic that we're in the midst of. And we know that this is going to be a long-term that we're not going anywhere. So I think that the Athena group reaching out to us and saying, asking us to add support and leadership to this made really good sense to us. In addition, aligning communications and data sharing is going to be really important as we think about systems change and moving forward. We are already investing in 21st century skill building, in 21st century economy with 21st century jobs. That will continue to be able to evolve with the Prosperity Collaboratives, and all of the other work that we're doing, again, is walking really in line with the Prosperity Collaboratives. And so we see all of these other initiatives between the child care conversations that we're having in multiple communities and regionally, the conversations that we're having around systems alignment, super navigators, that all of this is coalescing into a common vision for Clackamas County. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much for the opportunity to continue to do this great work. And I look forward to any questions or response that you might have.
Excuse me, one quick thing.
Go ahead, Cindy. We have 10 minutes left.
Okay, just very quickly, I think for the commissioners, this initiative is really very different from the other initiatives that you have set forth, mainly because this is local community driven, where the other initiatives are really county staff driven. This one is really around community. This is really about that engagement. So the pace, and I know Megan mentioned this before, the pace of change is going to be a little bit different. And I think it's really exciting, but I think it's important that we have that lens. I'll stop.
Commissioner Schrader, you had your hand raised. And you're on mute.
And I'm on mute. I've been listening and taking notes. So just a few statements. Okay, so basically in Estacada, it's housing. And one of the issues that we have found out is that we have not had quite the same opportunities as we have in our urban areas. And I know that our housing staff at this point is beginning to contract out with a group that actually specializes in rural housing, farm worker housing in particular, and also the opportunity to get USDA dollars. This isn't something that we actually have had the expertise before. The expertise has largely been in the work that we've been doing in the urban, suburban areas. So I'm really going to suggest that we get a hold, that we talk to our housing folks and make sure that the group that they've contracted with is aware that housing is an issue in Estacada, because it can give them another funding stream in order to really kind of access that. It's not just farm working housing, but it's also other housing across the board for folks. So that's a good thing to know. I want to thank Bridget, because thank you, Bridget. It's been a pleasure to kind of be your workforce board person. I'm glad to know that you're addressing the childcare piece. I'm glad to know that, yes, indeed, that this is a ground up piece where childcare, we've known about this for a long time in workforce. We've known about this for a long time, and that people have not had access to their phone. Right. Lost you for a minute. My daughter tried to call me from England, sorry, but I'll talk to her later. So I really appreciate that. I think that that's an issue. I'm hopefully that we've given ourselves enough wiggle room in the children's levy that we can help with that, as well as the small grants program. I suspect we're going to be talking about it and passing it on Thursday. But it was very, very important to me in particular, knowing that I've been working on this for a while, that kind of wiggle room is going to be important as we work with our local nonprofit providers, of which Clackamas Workforce Partner is one. In terms of Canby, I'm very happy Todos Juntos and the Ant Farm are working there. They've been very supportive of the children's levy. So I'm hopeful that anything they do there can also we have additional revenue streams should this pass. And one of the things I want to tell people, this has been a long time coming in Canby. Way back when, I worked with the Latino and Latina community, not only with working on my farm, but garnering housing, and also writing one of the first grants that we had that had Spanish language materials in the local library. So these families could actually start beginning to have more access to those kinds of materials. So I'm well aware that that's one of our huge people of color populations. I'm glad it's risen to the top in terms of a need that we need to address there. It was a need way back in the 1980s. It hasn't gone away. And I'm hopeful that now we can help continue that work to help that community thrive. Yeah, and I am really glad that Prosperity Collaboration has helped inform some of the things we need to be talking about for that children's levy, who has access to it, and also the fact that two of the biggest supporters are going to be working with our Canby community, which I think is huge. So thank you for that. And Bridget, thank you for identifying childcare, because to me, that's prevention. It allows parents not only to get to work, but if there are issues, rather than letting it move to the point where we have to do remediation, which is extremely important for our children and our population, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be, child abuse, those kinds of things, having that front load, particularly with childcare, is to me an entryway identifier that really can also help us get to the root before it becomes so bad that we're doing so much remediation for people. I think the continuum is extremely important, and I think that's what we need to do to inform what we do moving forward. And I want to thank Cindy Becker for pulling this forward. And I'm glad we've identified these key areas of poverty and need in our county, and that it's a bottom-up activity. So that's the news from Lake Wobegon.
Thank you, Ken.
With respect to Estacada, I had a conversation with the mayor the other day, and they have some interest in low-income and workforce housing there, and there's a piece of property that might be available that could be helpful in that. And I think it's particularly timely given that the CLT plant, the processing facility that's going to be located there, may well need that kind of housing. So I'd like to encourage you to contact Mayor Drinkwine and see if there is something that could be fortuitous for your program. And then I would like Megan to please say hello to Jean-Luc for me.
Absolutely. He's my father-in-law.
Yeah,
Okay.
I knew someone was going to catch that. Do we have any other questions or final comments?
Yeah,
Why
Chair
don't-
Bernard, sorry, I couldn't do the raise hand fast enough. I just want to thank everyone for the presentation. I'm really excited where this is going. Megan, you've done a great job. I'm so pleased with how community driven this has been. It's really been quite the effort since I joined the commission in 2017, and really happy to see where it is today. And Bridget, you're a rock star, and I just adore you. I'm so happy that if we have a local leader taking this forward, you are so well, you have just the background and the perspective and the lens and the values to really do a great job. So this is set to succeed, and it really, I could see another NACO award if there's ever another NACO convention for these efforts. Because they say when Marian Wright Edelman spoke to NACO, she showed the country and the zip codes of where outcomes for children struggle. And there are just certain zip codes. If you raise the supports and services in certain zip codes in certain areas, then you really affect society. So we're on that path. Great job. And I look forward to more updates as we keep going. And if you need us for anything, please, 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 any bridge building, any community outreach, anything that you need from your commissioners, I think I could speak for all of us that we are here and ready to serve. So thank you.
Thank you. And Cindy, you're a rock star too. All right. Well, thank you all very much for the presentation. I'm very happy that it's been a couple of years since we decided to do this, and it's worked out well. And now our small grants are being reviewed right now. So, and some of the focus is on those areas. So glad to see it move forward. Thank you all very much. All right, Gary, what's up next?
All right. Next is supporting housing services update, Metro Measure 26-210. We have our staff from Health, Housing, and Human Services and County Administration to present. So it looks like Jill Smith. Please bring Jill into the room. And Vahid Brown. And that should be it. And Brenda may be contributing. So Jill, whoever's starting, I'm not sure, Brenda, Jill, or Vahid?
Jill.
Jill, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, sometimes it takes a minute to get everything to work here. I'm thrilled to be here to give you kind of just a general update on the supportive housing services metro measure that passed in the Portland metro region on May 19th. Not very long ago, but a lot has happened since that passage, and I want to ensure that you're all kept up to date and have the opportunity to ask questions. So Vahid and I will take you through that, and Durenda is kind of the lead in the political realm of this, so she's going to give some updates and be here to answer your questions as well. I just wanted to remind you a little bit about what the measure was intended for. It's intended to provide housing and services to accompany the Affordable Housing Development Bond that was previously passed. This measure will enable us to ensure that the units we develop with the bond can serve the folks that are the neediest, the people that are 30% and below, disabled, homeless. Without this funding, that wouldn't be possible. The measure was put together in a way that would potentially match the scale of the need. Early calculations showed tremendous funding potential from this measure. COVID may have changed that. COVID has changed that tremendously. And we'll just have to watch over time and hope that things bounce back. We have not received as of yet an analysis from Metro of what that funding might look like now. I know Multnomah County is working on that since Metro hasn't been able to give us the projection, and we did agree to try to do that for the whole region rather than just Multnomah County. It's difficult to plan without having some idea of funding that we will be receiving. So as this moves forward, Metro's role is to provide oversight and to help us be transparent and ensure that the public's expectations, the voters' expectations are met. The county's role is to implement these supportive housing service programs. That's our area of expertise, and so thus far Metro has been really great partners in understanding that that's our area of expertise and letting us lead what that should look like. We intend, as counties, all three of us are meeting. Staff from Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah are meeting every week now to do intensive planning. We're trying to ensure alignment in every way. We think that it will be better as we work to put together regional housing plans and regional ways to serve people better. But also, as we talk to the voters about what we've accomplished, we need to be able to talk using the same data sets, the same gap analysis, the same templates for our plans so that we can speak to this well and in a way that's well understood. So I put on the staff report the funding distribution that was initially agreed upon. As a reminder to you all, it's on the top of the second page. Clackamas County initially will receive 21.33% of the funds. And over time, there has been an agreement to look at that again because there was a commitment that the funding would go back to the community in which it was earned. So that was just rough based on population, but it will be adjusted as needed over time. And I wanted to give you that little bit of background as a reminder, and then take you through a timeline that of course is just a high level estimate of what's going to happen in the coming months as we work to prepare for this funding to come to our county. So, and Vahid is going to help me with this. And before we move into the timeline, well, we can do this. We can have Brenda be part of this first part of our timeline. July through September of 2020, right now, there's a summer stakeholder committee that's meeting. And there's folks from Clackamas County. One of them is Bridget Daisy, who was just on. She's representing us at this summer stakeholder committee, as well as Tabitha Alajmi from the Clackamas Service Center, Francisco Garcia from Deb Northwest, Melissa Earlbaum from Clackamas Women's Services, and Dave Nielsen from the Home Builders Association. I am staffing those meetings, and our folks have been very engaged and contributing tremendously, and it's been a good process so far. They are charged with developing regional outcome metrics that we all are aligned to work within, refining regional values that will guide this work, and also ensuring community voices, their community voices, help to shape the implementation plans. Clackamas County community engagement work hasn't begun yet officially, but the Housing Authority did put out an RFP requesting proposals for culturally specific entities to conduct community engagement in our county. We've received 2 applications, and those will actually be scored this week. So we will share more with you on that soon. We really do intend for community engagement and the voices of the people that would be served by this measure to guide our work. and our planning efforts. And also right now, Drenda is very involved in working with Metro and our jurisdictional partners on the formation of a regional oversight committee that will kick in this fall to approve plans and to look at reports and to provide oversight. And do you want to talk about that process, Drenda?
Certainly, thank you. So I've been meeting with Metro staff and staff from Washington and Multnomah County Commission offices. And we're in discussion about just how those 5 members from each county will be appointed and chosen to serve on the oversight committee. So there will be more to come on that. There's also discussion of maybe increasing that to 6 members from each county and having the 6th member be one of our representatives that serves on the Housing Bond Oversight Committee. So that's all in discussion at this point, and no final decisions on the process have been made quite yet.
Thanks, Drenda. I'm going to have Vahid take you through the next little bits of the timeline, starting with September through December of this year.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you. So the timeline, kind of looking forward as we're starting now to develop a local implementation plan, that's kind of where the focus of the next several steps. So starting next month, we will form a local advisory body, which will help to inform the creation of the local implementation plan, or LIP. The 2 applicants for community engagement work that we're going to be looking at tomorrow. So a decision will be made this week with respect to our culturally specific community engagement. So we'll be doing community engagement with communities of color and historically marginalized communities throughout the county through September and November. And those engagement events and the work that they do will inform the LIP, especially with respect to racial equity and racial justice in the use of these dollars to fund supportive services. And in December, we will have an LIP, a local implementation plan, for the board's review. And if approved, it would lead to an intergovernmental agreement with Metro and the approval by Metro of our implementation plan. And that will be the plan that we'll be holding ourselves accountable to meeting the strategies and objectives in that document.
And something to keep in mind is we've been told it takes 2 to 3 years for a new tax to be fully implemented. So we envision this will ramp up slowly over time. And as we're meeting with our jurisdictional partners in Multnomah and Washington County, we all feel that the first year's plan will really be about ramping up. You'll see a lot of focus on ensuring our commitments to the Metro bond for those 30% units are met. You'll see a lot of commitments to help recruit and train nonprofit partners, especially culturally specific ones, to come into our county and to work with us as our partners. That is one of the goals that you'll see woven throughout our plan. And that's probably a lot of what will happen that first year, is trying to build our capacity as a county to work with community providers. And then in April through July, we hope that we are engaging with multiple community, culturally specific providers would be ideal, as a result of an RFP for funding that we've received or are about to receive, and we can enter into contracts with those folks. There's a substantial amount of training that will have to go into that work. There's a lot of data requirements and reporting requirements that we'll have to work with them on. And as I said, we're meeting with our county partners every week, and we've all agreed that we're going to be using a lot of the same providers, if not all the same providers, and we don't want to overly burden them. So we're going to try to align RFPs, try to align procurement requirements, try to align reporting requirements. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to respond effectively and provide the service to the folks that, is the whole intention behind this. that's going to be a big challenge of this effort. Moving on, in spring through summer of 2021, we should be receiving funding and doing ongoing community engagement and implementation of programs and being prepared to report to you on outcomes, which is really exciting, but there's a lot to happen before that point. The next thing we wanted to talk to you about just briefly is kind of the big buckets of information and analysis that have to be in our local implementation plan so that you understand what we're working on as we put this together. Vahid, do you want to kick this off?
Sure. So yeah, like Jill said, this is the kind of the categories that of required information and response in our local implementation plan. So we'll be using these, of course, to guide our community engagement as well, to kind of make sure we have all the information that we need from our communities that we'll be doing engagement with. So the plan begins with, it has to include a section that analyzes racial disparities in our homeless services system. So looking at racial disparities among people experiencing homelessness and within the priority service population that Jill talked about at the beginning, the 75% of the funds are dedicated to that priority population. An analysis of racial disparities and access to various programs. So we'll be doing that as well with our contracted provider. And then we need to articulate strategies to promote racial equity in the overall implementation of the measure. So this involves clearly defined service strategies and resource allocations intended to remedy existing disparities. So we're going to use the analysis of our existing racial disparities in the homeless services system and articulate how we're going to correct them. That will be the next section. The plan also will include our inclusive community engagement strategy. So this also speaks to the local advisory board that will be formed in the next month. And the measure does kind of stipulate some of the categories and sectors of the community that need to be represented in that board. But it also has an emphasis on representation of people with lived experience of homelessness and people from Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color. And then, Jill, you wanted to speak to kind of the priority population distribution theme.
I did, and I also, before I move on to that, Vahid, will you talk to the board just for a minute about, we've been talking about community engagement, but I want you all to know that we realize and understand that there's a big gap. This measure only allows us to serve 50% of our county approximately, and we recognize that's a big problem. So we have built in a second part to our community engagement work, and I wanted Vahid just to talk to a minute about what that is.
Yeah, the scope of work for the services that we procured for community engagement were kind of 3 parts. And so it goes broader than what's required by the bond, by the measure, because of the issue that Jill mentioned about so much of our county is outside the metro boundary. So our culturally specific provider will help us with the community engagement work to inform the LIP with respect to racial disparities in that analysis. They will also be providing an analysis of the overall homeless services system and whether it's accessible to all different kinds of communities beyond the requirements simply of the LIP. So we're actually looking at our whole system, not simply the system that will be built with these dollars. We want to better understand how coordinated access and how our homeless services are or are not accessible to communities of color, to people who don't speak English, to folks with disabilities, et cetera. And then a third component of the scope of work and services is an analysis of existing investments and resources for homeless services, how those might be used to serve geographical communities outside of the metro area, and a lot of engagement with the non-metro part of the county to also determine how accessible is our homeless service system to them now. And the provider will make a list of recommendations as to how we can serve the housing and housing and security needs of people outside of the metro boundary. So that'll be part that they're helping us do a much bigger effort than simply the LIP.
Yeah, we feel strongly, and we've heard from you, and I think we've heard from the voters as well, because 50% of our county is not going to receive these funds. So we feel strongly that we need to understand the needs outside of the county and prioritize the existing funding that we have today to serve those areas. And we also intend to create an additional chapter or an addendum in our plan that talks about how we'll serve those other parts of the county. That'll be something different than the other counties. That is the one area where we're very different, among others. I just wanted to make sure you all understood that we're thinking about this. And I wanted to talk about priority populations that are going to be served by this measure. There was substantial amount of conversation that happened when Commissioner Fisher and I were attending many meetings. And there was an agreement after a lot of debate regarding priority populations. And I'm very pleased to report that there was a commitment that 75% of this funding must serve extremely low income, homeless, disabled people, or people that are a member of a family with those concerns. These are the folks that are experiencing long-term or frequent episodes of literal homelessness or are at risk of experiencing homelessness. They're the hardest served. They're the folks that you see, on the streets or in shelters, and they are our priority. 25% of this funding is set aside to serve people who are experiencing homelessness or may face substantial risk of homelessness. So much, much broader. And as we solve the first bucket or the first grouping where the 75% is targeted toward, we're then allowed to amend the funding and shift more towards the prevention side. So I'm really hoping we can get to that point someday. And the other areas of the plan, they're just, there's not a lot of content yet. We just wanted you to know about them. We're going to be required to address current investments, to talk about those, what they are. Geographic distribution, we just spoke a little bit about that. Access coordination, an approach to coordinating access to services with partnering jurisdictions. 5% of our funding has to be committed to creating a regional housing system. And part of that likely will be so that no matter where you are, if you're homeless or near homelessness, there's one place you can go to get help, regardless of where you live. And I think that's something that we're going to be challenged to create. We will have to address procurement, how we plan to make our investments, and we'll have to talk about outcomes reporting. So a lot of work in front of us. And now we're happy to take questions.
Well, we've got a few hands up. We start with Sonia and then Martha.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. It's so good to see it so happening. It's really amazing, and with so much work from so many people. I think this is mostly a Gary question. I'm really curious how, so we're having the Coalition of Communities of Color look at Clackamas County and do an assessment. I'm curious how that will align with this effort with the homeless services. And then also, my other thought is if the children's levy passes in November, there's also an equity lens there. So I'm just curious how we are thinking about aligning all of our work around this.
Sure, I can start. The Coalition of Communities of Color, we're just now beginning our work with them. So this will be something we will raise with them, of helping align all of these many efforts in Clackamas County, the two that you just mentioned, Commissioner Fisher. The coalition work is going to be over a 3-year period, so it's not immediate, and neither is this housing services program. So there will be an alignment. We just have to make sure we're informing our team at the coalition that that is the case. So right now I don't have a specific plan, but we definitely will make sure we're aligning all of this work together.
Okay, Martha?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Jill and Vahid for all the work you've been doing, because you really hit the nail on the head. One of my biggest concerns is that a lot of the dollars, the immediate dollars we're getting from the Metro bond and from the other housing for wraparound services is concentrated in the suburban urban area, because they're within the Metro, I think, urban growth boundary. And my concern is, as you said, 50% of our county has similar needs, but it's a rural area. And we have to address their needs as well as the needs of everyone. And that really has been backed up by the Prosperity Initiative, particularly looking at the Canby area with our large Hispanic populations, and looking at Milwaukee, where they really need access to childcare as a wraparound service. And these are things from the ground up that are percolating up that need to inform a lot of this work. And Estacada has housing needs. Now, Jill, could you help us? What was the name of the group you just contracted with to move the housing from under HACS auspice to, it's a nonprofit group building capacity, and they're going to be using USDA dollars? What's the name of it?
It's FHDC, Farm Worker Housing Development Corporation.
Do they do more than just farm worker housing? Is it possible that they also do access to other opportunities for low-income housing that isn't necessarily connected to farm worker housing?
Yes, they do both, and they use the income that they make from their more traditional affordable housing to provide the supportive services for the farm worker housing. That's part of their business.
So it's going to be an area of expertise that's going to be addressed then. So we're not just working in we're not just working in urban suburban, which is critically important, but because we have a diverse county, and because one of our largest people of color population is Latina and Latino in those outlying areas, largely with farm working and housing and things of that sort, particularly Canby, Estacada, Molalla in particular. I think that's where the transfer is going, am I correct? Where they're going to be taking over for the farm worker housing that we did years ago.
Yes,
yeah.
It's in Molalla, yes.
Well, I thank you for that, because my concern is the balance of everybody having the same level of access, whether you're rural, urban, or suburban. And I'm hopeful that the dollars that you're getting hopefully can free up additional dollars to actually do the work across the continuum, particularly because the Prosperity Initiatives has shown needs in those areas as well. So Milwaukee being the most urban and the other areas being rural. So I'm glad to see that. To me, that's a critical alignment that needs to happen as we move forward with these initiatives. So thanks, guys. Appreciate all you do. Thanks, Vahid. You guys do great work. Appreciate it. I'm done.
Ken, and then Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No questions, just a comment. One is, I truly appreciate the fact that you're making this a whole county approach, taking this opportunity with the passage of that Metro bond to really look at us as a whole county, not unlike what we're trying to remind our staff of as staff of Clackamas County, that it's a one county approach. So I'm very appreciative of that. I think a lot of folks in our small towns and rural community oftentimes feel like there's no focus on them. So really appreciate that aspect. The second thing is, as I recall, Martha Schrader did some work that got a one-stop program going for farm issues not too long back. And I heard you mention that for the housing issue. I really think that's a good idea. If you can have a single point of contact for people rather than a bureaucratic spreading out of things across 100 buildings, etc., it will make things a lot easier for people. It's very difficult oftentimes for folks with special needs to navigate the system, and a one-stop is a really good approach. So I appreciate that effort, and I'll leave it at that. But great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul.
Yeah, I agree with all the comments, so I won't repeat them. I do want to talk about it. It seems that the formula for distribution of the funds ought to be somewhat similar to the formula for the housing bond, right? I mean, it seems as though that the services that are the services a measure that passed tying to the housing bond, that the residencies of all that new housing ought to, benefit and have those services. So it seems to me that that whatever that formula is, it ought to be, somewhat close. And obviously there's that homeless services bond is not limited to just those housing developments, obviously, that we're working on as a result of the housing bond. Try to commingle these two things together. So if I have a question at all, are we having any difficulty with that kind of understanding? And the second question, are we going to be assured that we have, our key people at the table on all these committees? It seems to me we ought to have some ability to choose who we want to represent our folks and be comfortable with that. And I just want to make sure that we have that leverage is there. I mean, it's those taxes are being collected all around us, and it seems to me we ought to have that leverage there.
Brenda, do you want to talk about the membership?
Right. So we are in those discussions right now, and the questions are centering around whether or not the county appoints or nominates a slate of people from which Metro would then choose a representation. So in either scenario, we would still have the input on who we would like to serve on the committee.
And with respect to the local advisory board, if I could, the Board of County Commissioners will have the final say. It will be the same as with other ABCs, advisory boards and committees. So staff with H3S would work to identify people that could serve on the board and then present the results of our recruitment to the board for consideration and approval. For the local one.
So what are we asking for as we're negotiating this? Are we asking for our ability to pick our own folks? I mean, it doesn't seem like the approval aspect of Metro approving that. It seems to me like there's I'm trying to understand what the purpose of that is.
I think part of the purpose is Metro wants to make sure that they're over the region, that the membership covers the all of the areas that are called out in the measure. Someone who's experienced homelessness, there's racial equity concerns on the committee, those kinds of things. So instead of making sure if each county has to cover all of those areas in their nominees, that we can have that done regionally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I just had the concern that, I think we know typically who our folks are in the county, who are going to be good, strong voices and are going to represent our folks and our needs and better understand those. And I think we should have the freedom and the independence to select those folks.
Thank you for that feedback. And those are exactly the topics that are under discussion.
So it's just a quick question on my first part of my question, Jill. Any comments as far as the proportionality or how that looks?
Yes, I'm going to try to address that. And I think Commissioner Fisher was maybe even more involved in those conversations than I was. The reason that we started out at almost 22% is that is the percentage that we receive of the Metro housing bond, and it's based on population. This is a little bit more complicated of a tax mechanism, because it's based on only high income earners, and there's also business net profits tax in there. So we wanted to see where all the funding actually is coming from, and Clackamas County thinks that we might be deserving of more than that percentage based on our actual contributions to this tax. So there was just an agreement that over time, when funding flows in, we are willing to shift these percentages if needed.
Okay, thank you.
Sonia and then Ken.
Yeah, I was just going to answer Paul's question, but Jill did a really great job with it. It is very similar, my understanding, the formula to the Metro Housing Bond. But there was also during the conversation when Jim and I were Clackamas County, there was the concern that if Washington County, because they have those businesses with Intel and Nike, and if they got the bulk of all of the business and Clackamas County didn't, people from Washington County said, well, that doesn't serve the region very well if Washington County ends up with all of these resources and Clackamas and Multnomah don't. So we don't know how it's going to come out as far as how the income tax and the business income tax is going to go. And that's why there's a commitment to look at it into the future with both of having the money go back to where it originated, but also with a lens towards equity for the region as well.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also recall a conversation about where the business exists might be all of the owners and employees may be coming from Clackamas County. So it's just an equity discussion.
All right, Ken.
I wanted to echo Paul's concerns with respect to the selection of our representatives. And I come down strongly on the side of we should be able to pick the people we want to represent our county in this. I have no problem with the metrics that Metro is suggesting should be looked at. I understand that there are many diverse populations that we want to make sure are represented in this whole issue. But in terms of the selection of people, that should be our choice. And I would echo Paul's concerns 100% on that issue.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much, Jill and Fahid. Have a great day, rest of your day.
Thanks all, you too.
Thank you, Gary. What's up?
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Next is abandoned vehicles. We have our county council, sheriff's office, transportation and development staff to have a discussion with you. So that would be Stephen Madcore. Well, Christina can see the list, so please bring them in.
We do also have multiple Stephen Madcores, so I will be changing names as soon as I figure out who everyone is.
Just bring them all in and see who they are.
Okay.
Oh, it's bad enough having one of them. Oh,
hey, that's my brother. How are
All right, Stephen, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Good. Thank you. Afternoon, commissioners. We're here to chat with you about abandoned vehicles. And when I say we, I mean this is across county department lines. We have the sheriff's office, we have county council, we have facilities, we have DTD, we have code enforcement, we have building codes. The reason we're doing this is because we have heard a lot of complaints from county residents about abandoned RVs, cars, boats on county property or on county right-of-way along roadsides. Recently, the board authorized the expenditure of dollars to tow a 41-foot abandoned RV, which was like a 1978 health hazard off of Clear Creek Road. That was done over the course of the last week. It is now in storage, pending disposition to the tune of $5,100. It was a 41-foot RV. You had to get a semi to tow it out of there. We have another vehicle presently right in front of Tech Services, an abandoned car, which will be towed tomorrow. That too will remain in a lot of impound for 30 days. Title will change, and that will be either sold, scrapped, or salvaged. We have provided you with 3 different documents: a staff report, a memo by our summer law clerk, Jennifer Barrett, who will be presenting on that, and also the good work of the Sheriff's Office. We have Captain Strangefield, and we also had Lieutenant Kate appearing for that. So you'll see, if you did review those documents, that they are aligned with their concerns and they are aligned with their proposed resolutions on how best to respond to this. Unfortunately, the answer to this from the county's perspective is really going to be the expenditure of dollars. Both the Sheriff's Office and County Council have estimated $100,000 annually to respond to these types of issues. I am going to turn it over to Jennifer, who is going to give the board a rundown on her analysis, her research, how it compares with other jurisdictions, Portland, Gresham, Vancouver, and she'll be available to answer any questions on that. And we'll also have the Sheriff's Office available too. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all. Just to kind of go over what Stephen started out with, and then I'll go in more further to my report. We are currently tracking 9 RVs that are left abandoned on either the side of the right-of-way, the roads, or on county property. These RVs are toxic because they could be leaking wastewater or fuel. They also, the older ones have asbestos in them and other toxins that might be there. It creates a really unsafe environment for the community, and potentially if there's someone living in those old RVs. The disposal fee is estimated at $100 per foot, which is extremely expensive. And we estimate that if there's 20 to 25 that the county needs to remove in 1 year, that would be a cost of approximately $100,000 just to dispose of them. So the current issue is that tow companies, the Sheriff's Office will have them go out and tow them, but there's a really reluctance in towing them. Because it's hard for them to find the last owner. Sometimes it's been traded multiple times or, given as a gift. It also takes up a lot of space in their tow yards. They don't have that extra capacity to have an RV sitting there for an unknown amount of time. And it's, again, expensive for them to dispose if they can't find the owner. And the worst thing that we want to do is have them resell it to someone for a very cheap amount, and then ends up back on the roads, and then you have to deal with it again. So that's kind of the major current problems. The Sheriff's Office does have the ability to tow these RVs if they're blocking traffic or if they're causing any hazard. They can have that towed immediately. Otherwise, if it's abandoned on the side of the road, it's usually tagged for 3 days, and then they're able to remove it. And then we also have the ability, they also have the ability to sell the vehicle after 30 days. But, as we've kind of discussed, that most of these are very old RVs that aren't worth anything. So it's difficult for them to sell it to make a profit to cover all of the towing fees. So in my analysis, I talked to a few different people from Portland because this is a big issue there. The Department of their Bureau of Transportation says that they estimate like 400 vehicles that they're removing from the streets every year. And so that creates a huge amount of money that they're having to do in order to remove those. They have 2 programs. They have the Derelict RV program, which is specifically run by their Department of Transportation, and that is for abandoned vehicles. There's no one living in them. They've just been, abandoned on the side of the road. And then they have a community caretaking side of it where the police is involved because this might be abandoned, but there's someone's living in it, or, there's potential crime involved with it, or, there might be drug paraphernalia or other items. So they have the police take care of that part. They have a contract with a towing company the towing company picks it up and they put it in a city lot. And the city goes and tries to contact the old owner, and they will release them to the owner, given that they have proof of title, some kind of ownership over, just a simple note. They need concrete official documents that someone is the owner. And if that is the case, they will release the RV to the person as long as they have guaranteed that it will be parked on a private lot or a private area, that it won't end up on the streets again. They do not charge the owners for any of this. They just give it back to them. They have had trouble tracking down money. There's a number of laws that are kind of outlined on the staff report of, if people don't sell with a title, or they don't register with a DMV that they now own the vehicle. And I can go more into depth if that's something you want to learn about, but it's very difficult to find these owners. Sometimes the people have removed the VIN number. Sometimes they don't have license plates. So I think Portland is kind of like, this is not really worth the money to and the legal, amount to kind of track down these previous owners. So that's kind of their way of doing it. They have two revenue streams. The first is that every single vehicle that's towed, they charge $9, and that, they have an administrative fee of a certain amount, and $9 of that administrative fee goes specifically to this derelict RV towing project. And then the rest of that fee is going through the general fund. So just to give you an idea, in 2018, they got $180,000 from the towing of vehicles, that general amount, and then they supplemented that $1.5 million in order to create that difference, and that came from the general fund. So I have a slight typo there in the program costs on the memo, but it's 1.7 million is the overall cost that Portland has. They have tried to reach out to people in Salem, politicians in Salem, to try to get some money for this, because this is a huge burden for the city. They've been receiving a lot of pushback because it's not an issue in a lot of other parts of the state. It's kind of an issue in Portland, and now we're seeing it in Clackamas, but and other counties, in the metro area, but it's not an issue that they're seeing in other parts of the state. So, they're very open to maybe doing some kind of city or county group effort to talk to people down in Salem, but on their own, they were having trouble getting an added fee. And then I did a little bit of research on some of the other cities in our area. Everyone has it a little bit differently. Some cities and counties are creating a permit so that people can legally park their RV on the street for 3 to 10 days. And sometimes they'll charge like a $10 fee and limit that to 10 days, or and then you can only reapply for a permit maybe 3 times a year. So there's that option where you can generate some money from that. And then also fees for illegal parking, but again, it's if it's difficult to find out who the owner is, it may be difficult to charge those illegal parking fees. And then maybe doing as the same as Portland did, and having that general administrative fee for all vehicles towed in Clackamas County, and that would transfer over to the funding needed for the RVs. Again, this is it's a small amount of money that you're going to generate versus how much money it might cost to remove all these vehicles. It's interesting. The Portland team was telling me, they're like, we thought we'd have this project for 1 or 2 years or something, and then we'd close down. Well, they have 6 employees right now, and it doesn't seem like, you know, every year they're dealing with more and more RVs. So unfortunately, it's a problem that's consisted over the last 3 years. And then I did want to just highlight on, I'm not sure what percentage of, you know, or if any vehicles are being used for housing in Clackamas County, but there are City of Portland and City of Gresham have programs in place for people who are, you know, either in RVs or at campsites, and, you know, really help give them a second start, because, you know, if they're using it for housing, you know, there's an underlying issue outside of the RV issue with housing. So
Thank you, Jennifer.
that basic lowdown. Let me know if you have any questions.
Excellent work. Thank you for that. And commissioners, just a couple points. We have, in conjunction with the sheriff's office, tried to provide notice to the last registered and subsequent owners of the vehicles that we have towed. The 41-foot RV was registered last in 2004 to a couple in Portland. We sent it to them, came back undeliverable. We tracked them down to Plano, Texas. She provided me the name of the people they sold it to. I talked to them, and they sold it to somebody off of Craigslist. So the list goes on and on. Same with the car owner. He sold it to a guy off of Craigslist. And as Jennifer said, the consequence of not registering the vehicle and not filing any conveyance documents with state law is essentially non-existent. So going after them in that manner really isn't a viable option. And at the end of the day, the ones that we're getting, if you look in the sheriff's packet of materials, you will see these vehicles. They are disabled, they're missing engines, they're missing drivetrains. Some of them look like they could be partially used as habitation, but these are really vehicles that are nothing more than going right to the scrapyard itself. So they're going to be expensive to dispose of. And I would like to invite the sheriff's office in to see if they have comments that they would like to provide the board. Captain, do you have something you want to share?
I do. In the room with me is Lieutenant Chris Cade as well, and I'll move out of the way for him to talk about this a little bit more, as he worked with Sergeant Collinson to put that packet of information together over the last 6 months or so. But the core issue for us is not about the policy of towing vehicles. You know, we have a very good tow program in place, that we have contracts with tow companies to come and deal with vehicles that we tow in the field for either being hazards or other violations that we come across as a public safety issue. The issue, as Mr. Madcore and Ms. Barrett stated, is these derelict, abandoned, no engine, no drivetrain, clearly abandoned scrap heaps that are left on the right of way or the county property, that there are no owners and there's no incentive for these contracted tow companies to come out and deal with, because it just costs them money. Where normal tows, they have the ability to charge fees to owners of vehicles and deal with cost recovery that way. These other derelict vehicles that we're talking about would cost companies money to come deal with without us having some funding. So I'll turn over a larger issue to Lieutenant Cate.
Yeah, so I guess additionally, we had one tow company that was interested in taking on this project. And I'm not sure how many tows they were able to accomplish, but DEQ ended up having an issue with how they were disposing of them and was fined a substantial amount of money, and they will just pass now, as will all tow companies. And so there's no money in it for tow companies. It's more of a risk than anything. And as we were kind of talking, I remembered there was a big RV, probably 30 to 35 foot, that sort of on its last leg made it to Winco Foods parking lot about 1.5 years ago. People started living out of it since it's on private property. Winco couldn't get it towed because tow companies aren't going to touch it because nobody's going to come and get it, and then they're stuck with it. Sort of fortunately or unfortunately, it caught fire, and then ultimately they had to get rid of it then, but it created a hazard to residents of the county, because now there's a fire in a parking lot where a lot of people go to for all kinds of different types of shopping and food and everything. So Yeah, it's a big issue. Once they're abandoned on the side of the road, sometimes that, creates other people that will just come and go, live out of them, and then it creates other neighborhood problems. I know that we've had some on Fuller Road, and there's a church and a handful of schools that are right there. So that creates more issues with, I guess, unfortunately, sometimes the people that are associated to those have other issues going on. I know Jennifer spoke of housing, and there's mental health issues and drug issues also that end up being associated with that. And once a tow company does, in the past, I've heard stories of a tow company towing it, and then just to get rid of it so they aren't storing it, then they're selling it out the back for $100 just because at least that way they aren't continuing to store it for nothing, and in the hopes that somebody's going to come and get it, which they're not because they aren't worth anything. So, oh, then also one of the other things also, and I know we haven't had this issue yet, but I know Multnomah County is, and Jennifer, maybe you uncovered this, but there's quite an issue with sailboats in Portland also. And fortunately, our marine unit's really active, and it seems like their activity has been able to keep some of the sailboats that are used as shelter on the Willamette down in Multnomah County. But that's another thing, is that they're creating a separate hazard in the water by, either a fire or sinking or whatever. They're just abandoned. You're not able to find an owner. I've heard that some of those have been found on the side of roads where they get abandoned, somebody's living out of it until they're not, and then it's stuck for usually police or the whatever city agencies to deal with. So certainly entertain any other questions.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Yeah,
I think Captain Strangfield had one more thing. Thank you.
Yeah, just was one last item on part of the sheriff's office. We're used and contacted for these livability issues, including these abandoned vehicles, and we're happy to address them anytime we're called to the scene. But the administrative part on the back end, which Mr. Madcore outlined, the storage of it as some sort of county-owned lot, dealing with the liens and title, and then ultimate delivery to a tow company in the end. The staffing and resources to be involved in that administration, I just want to make sure it doesn't fall squarely on the sheriff's office to deal with, that needs to be partnered with others. And I know that that's why a lot of people are here talking about this issue, not just the sheriff's office, and I greatly appreciate that.
Thanks, Captain. So commissioners, we don't have all the answers. We do have options. They're incremental. There's no decision point for you today, but I do submit that this problem will not be going away. All you need to do is drive on Northeast 33rd in Portland up by the Oregon Food Bank. Between there and the Salty's Restaurant, Marine Drive, you will see that road flanked left and right with motorhomes, abandoned cars, sailboats like Lieutenant Kate mentioned. Some are occupied, some are not. But right now we have 9 RVs that the sheriff's office has been tracking, which are just basically composting there. And they are on right of way. So sooner or later, we're going to be responsible for hauling them out. So we don't need direction from the board today, but I do submit that you'll be hearing from your constituents in the future, and you will probably want to involve all on the screen today, from facilities, Jeff Jorgensen's shop, because we have folks who abandon cars on county property, and code enforcement between Michelle Amen and Cheryl Bell and Matt Rizal, as well as the sheriff's office and county council. It will be a concerted effort. And we do have options, but we know that your priorities have been established. We know that your budget is tight, but be advised, like I'll say, I don't want to be too prophetic, but this is not going to get any better. And we're here to answer any questions you might have.
All right, Ken, and then Paul.
Well, after reading the report and everything, it seems like the sheriff's department has outlined the best solution available to us. I did like the idea of having our own lot, so we're not paying storage fees to some private lot. So fencing off a chunk of property where we can store them until we can get rid of them would be helpful. And I'd also include a fee at our campgrounds for RVs, where we allow RV camping, that could be added to the current fee as a dedicated source of funding to at least do some recapture of the costs. So if it's $25 for a night, maybe it should be $30 for a night for camping, and $5 goes to the fund. Just some suggestions, but I agree with Mr. Madcore. This is not going to go away, and this is a quality of life livability issue, and it tends to attract other kinds of bad behavior in an area where this is occurring. So I think from a law enforcement point of view, it's also beneficial to address it now. Thank you.
So, yeah, a couple, 3 years ago, Mr. Madcore and I talked about this problem, and because I saw it coming, because I heard of cases in Portland, and I knew it was something we had to deal with, and we didn't really come up with a solution. The one thing I have a little bit of hesitancy on is having our own storage yard, and it's because of this reason, is that you tow it, the cost of towing it twice is the issue. So ideally, you're able to hold it for the 30 days and then it gets towed again. And if we have a place to put it and we can't have there's no means of any cost recovery, it seems to me it's foolish to have 2 tow charges. So my question is it possible that 30-day holding period can be sited at the area where the motorhome is, or where it sits today, for example? Let's just say it sits there today, it's located here. We do the 30-day process, and then we tow it once to have it scrapped. Is that a possibility?
Yes.
Okay. So that would be a savings, right? We don't need our own land, and we don't need to tow it twice. So the next question is that the revenue generation, because we're on this path of we got to have cost recovery, and a lot of ideas out there. I guess we ought to be giving some direction at some point of what means we can get some cost recovery. I think boats come under the Marine Board. I don't know how I believe they do. I don't know how that registration goes, but if there's a registration aspect to RVs and boats, maybe that's a way to capture the revenue.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's probably a legislative thing that we'd have to look at. The other thing about storing it is that we actually create a brown soil site, because these vehicles are often leaking, draining solvent and oil onto the soil. So I think Paul's idea about the 30 days where it's located and then towing it directly is the ideal way. So you guys didn't want answers, you just wanted questions. There's some ideas for you. Anything else?
That's it for us.
All right. Thank
you for your
Stephen.
time today,
Thanks,
commissioners.
guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
I would like to ask you, commissioners, do you want staff to come up with a solution and a recommendation, or are you okay just status quo and do this piecemeal?
Well,
Solution.
I guess my question is that what do we see as a first step? To me, we need to figure out how we're going to capture revenue, right, to make cost recovery. But I don't want to double our cost or grow the cost. So, providing a storage yard and all of the security that comes with that, plus the extra towing is just we just don't have the money to do that. I mean, it's not a wise way of spending the money to cope with this problem. And I can understand why the other lots are doing it, because it's not economically feasible. They can't really recover the cost. So I don't see we ought to be doubling or tripling the burden to our taxpayers when we can just do it as low cost as possible. So what is the first step, Gary?
I would say a sort of a head nod from the board today that yes, you want a solution to this, and then the brilliant minds on the screen, staff I mean, You too, Commissioners. But the staff will come up with options for you that are either full cost recovery or second best. So would you like staff to kind of do some research and come back to you with proposals?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yes. Consider this a head nod.
Okay. So I will work with Stephen and the group here to come up with options of how to fund this at full cost recovery, if at all, and if not, then that will be a choice for you to make. But we'll do that. And the legwork's already been done. Thank you, team. But we'll loop back to you for it.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, folks.
Thank
All
you.
right. What's up next, Gary?
That is the
Thank you.
final policy session for today, Chair, and we are all caught up on issues. So we are finished.
All right. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds good.
Thursday business. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.